What's up, everyone? Welcome back to the channel. It is officially the week of training camp for the Green Bay Packers, starting in just 2 days on this Wednesday. And during this last weekend, we got some very important injury updates on a lot of different players going into training camp. So today I want to go over all of that and also talk about what the injury updates will mean. First and foremost, if you are a new viewer to this channel, I'll be posting a ton of content during training camp. Like I said, it starts this Wednesday, so there'll be likely 2 videos plus every single day going over the training camp highlights, training camp recaps, and whatever else news happens with the Green Bay Packers. So if you want everything Green Bay Packers and to stay up to date all the time, definitely go down and click the subscribe button. It supports my channel a ton, as well as leave a like on the video. 2 very important updates for both Rashan Gary and Eric Stokes on the Packers defense. Both players were placed on the physically unable to perform list to start training camp. The Packers placed cornerback Eric Stokes and outside linebacker Rashan Gary on the active/physically unable to perform list ahead of the opening of training camp. Stokes is working his way back from Liz Frank foot surgery that ended his 2022 season, and Gary's coming off a torn ACL. But in terms of Eric Stokes, we did get a promising update. So although he was placed on the PUP, sources said the Packers are taking a cautious approach with a talented player. If all goes well, he could make his training camp debut in a couple weeks. So it doesn't seem like Eric Stokes is going to be ready this coming Wednesday, but he might be ready to go in a couple of weeks, which I think will be very good for him. It's been a while since we've seen him on the field, and he's obviously going through a lot of injuries. It wasn't just the Liz Frank injury, he also had a leg injury as well, ankle injury, I believe. So we're going to see what type of Eric Stokes we get back. Eric Stokes is, mainly plays off of his speed. He's a very fast player. So who knows how fast he actually will be after these injuries. He could definitely slow down a little bit, which I think will hurt his game a lot. But the Green Bay Packers do have a solid cornerback room, with Jair Alexander and Rasul Douglas both healthy. Keyshawn Nixon likely taking that next step on the defensive side as that nickel corner. They don't have to rush Eric Stokes back. They don't need him to start week 1. He likely wouldn't start week 1 even if he was healthy. So they're taking this cautious approach, which makes sense. Ease Eric Stokes into practice. We know the Packers are very careful with their injuries. They don't tend to rush anyone back, and that's going to remain the same with Eric Stokes, Rashan Gary, and some of the other injuries here that we're about to talk about. Eric Stokes definitely had a down 2022 season after a very promising 2021 rookie season, but when you look at some of the stats, he actually didn't have as bad as a year as most people make it out to be, and I still think he can have a nice turnaround season so long he stays healthy. So if he gets some training camp work in, maybe some preseason snaps and whatnot, and he gets ready and then they ease him in and kind of have him on a snap count a little bit, I definitely believe Eric Stokes can turn it around and play a pretty significant role in this defense in 2023. I couldn't walk until about mid-January, Stokes said, getting back to running, getting back to moving around, getting back to break, cutting, and all that stuff, finally putting on cleats for the first time since my injury last week. So it's like small little goals that I got in mind, and I keep approaching it and keep checking off. Now, as for Rashan Gary, that was placed on the PUP as well. I don't see him practicing at all during training camp and likely to miss, the first portion of the NFL season. Players placed on the PUP have to miss a minimum of the first 4 weeks of the NFL season. So if Rashan Gary does remain on the PUP, which I believe will happen, he will at minimum miss the first 4 weeks of the season. And that's kind of the timetable we're looking at with Rashan Gary. A lot of people believe he won't even be back until after week 6, which is also a possibility. But there has been some updates over the offseason. I released a couple of videos about him, and it's been very promising. He's been ahead of schedule, and we saw last year Elton Jenkins return very, very early. That could be the case this year with Rashan Gary. But like I said, the Packers aren't ones to rush players back, and I don't think they'll be doing that with Rashan Gary. I'm hoping he'll be 100% once he returns, because he was on track to be one of the best edge rushers in the NFL last season, and he's a very important part of this defense. But other edge defenders are going to have to pick up the slack in his absence. Their first-round draft selection, Lucas Van Ness, will get plenty of snaps, in my opinion, as early as week 1. Justin Hollins, a street free agent they signed last offseason, re-signed this offseason, might end up being the starter opposite Preston Smith. And then there's also Kingsley Enagbare, their 5th-round rookie from last year, who stepped up to the plate after Rashan Gary's injury and started playing pretty well. So he could also fight for that starting role against Justin Hollins. I believe it's going to be one of Hollins or Enagbare opposite Preston Smith come week 1, but edge is such a rotational position where backups get like 30 to 35 to even 40% of snaps. So even if Lucas Van Ness and Inigbari aren't starting, they're still going to get plenty of snaps as early as week 1. And hopefully they can mesh and create a nice pass rushing group, because if you can rush the passer, your defense is going to look a lot better. Your secondary is going to be able to perform a lot better if you can get pressure on the quarterback quickly. So the Packers are definitely going to have to set up certain things to create pressure on the quarterback without someone like Rashan Gary, who is easily and by far their best pass rusher. Now, over the weekend, the Packers originally placed offensive lineman Jake Hansen on the PUP, but that was a short stay, only a couple days, and then they activated him off the PUP, so he'll be ready to go to start training camp. He was originally placed on the PUP last Friday after missing those 11 games in 2022 with a significant biceps injury. Now Hansen will be fighting for a roster spot on the 53-man roster. The Packers, in my opinion, have a very stacked offensive line room, and Hansen's going to have to show out to even make this 53-man roster because you have players like Sean Ryan, who had a very disappointing rookie season, but I doubt the Packers would move on from him as early as year 2. I mean, we've seen crazier, but I don't think they would. We have Zach Tom as well, who could be the backup center, technically speaking, so that would kind of take Jake Hansen's role as a backup center. We'll see if he ends up making the roster. My bet is he doesn't. I just believe there's other offensive linemen, such as Caleb Jones, who is a tackle, not an interior guy, but deserves that roster spot over someone like Jake Hansen, who's had plenty of opportunity and never really provided too much on that offensive line. Wide receiver Jeff Cotton was also placed on the PUP along with Jake Hansen, but he still remains on it. And the final 2 injury updates heading into training camp: Packers rookies Grant DuBose and Cameron McDonald are opening the training camp on the NFI list. Now, DuBose and McDonald do remain on the NFI to start training camp, but they can be activated at any time. If we remember back towards OTAs and minicamp, Grant DuBose didn't practice a single time for the Packers this offseason after being drafted in the 7th round out of Charlotte. I actually made a tape video on him going over his college tape out of Charlotte and what he could bring to the Green Bay Packers. But first, he has to get healthy and get on the field, or else he might not even make the 53-man roster. If someone like Malik Heath continues his hot streak, he very well could steal that 6th wide receiver position. Also someone like Bo Melton. I actually did just make a video also on Malik Heath going over his tape and if he could make the Green Bay Packers roster. So if you want to check that out, just click the link right above. And Cameron McDonald, a tight end, I don't see making the roster. I see the Packers just rolling with DeGuara, Tyler Davis, and their 2 rookies, Luke Musgrave and Tucker Kraft. But the Packers have kept a lot of tight ends before, but the same as DuBose, he has to practice. So if he's not practicing, doesn't practice at any point in training camp, he's obviously not going to make the roster. But those are all the injury updates we got heading into this training camp. I am super, super excited. Probably more excited than I've been in a very long time, just because of how different this team is, and we kind of have a big question mark right now. We don't know what the offense is going to look like, how that offense is going to be ran under a new quarterback such as Jordan Love, who is vastly different than Aaron Rodgers, what type of offense Matt LaFleur is going to run with him, how the wide receivers are going to mesh with Jordan Love, an extremely young wide receiver room, multiple rookies added on that offense, Jaden Reed at wide receiver, Luke Musgrave, Tucker Kraft at tight end, a pretty stacked offensive line room, how that is going to end up with Zach Tom or Josh Nijman potentially starting. There are so many things I'm excited for this training camp, and I'm just so happy it's only 2 days away. And as a reminder, there'll be tons of content on this channel come training camp, so remain in the loop, turn on post notifications to not miss any of that. But I'll catch you on the next one. Thanks for watching, and as always, go Pack Go.